The village of Ndemu was a quiet place where children ran barefoot, playing under the shades of mango and baobab trees. They fetched water from the river, helped their parents with chores, and eagerly attended school every morning. One morning, a new student arrived. Her name was Adisa. She was small with bright eyes and dark curly hair tied in neat braids, but there was something different about her. She barely spoke unless spoken to, and even then, her voice was soft and distant, like someone who was listening to something far away. During lunch hours, Adisa did something unusual. She reached into her school bag and pulled out a cloth pouch. Inside were small round sweets, bright red and green, wrapped in shiny paper. "Would you like some?" she asked, offering them to her classmates. The children's eyes widened. Sweets were a rare treat in the village. "Where did you get them?" Kofi, a curious boy, asked. "From my grandmother," Adisa replied with a small smile. That was a lie. Her grandmother had passed away a long time ago. The children didn't ask further. One by one, they eagerly grabbed the sweets and popped them into their mouths. Adisa watched them chew. Her smile never faded. That night, everything changed. Kofi laid on a sleeping mat, his younger sister snoring softly beside him. The room was dark, except for the faint glow of the moon through the wooden window. That night, he had a dream, but it did not feel like a dream. He saw himself standing in a dark forest, where trees twisted like long fingers reaching towards the sky. There was no wind, yet the branches swayed. Strange whispers filled the air. "Come, come." The voices were soft, almost kind, but something about them sent chills down his spine. Suddenly, he felt light. His body still lay on the mat, but his arms and legs lifted into the air slowly. He rose, not in flesh but in spirit. His soul was leaving his body. Through the window, he floated into the night like a leaf caught in the wind. He was not alone. Other children who had collected sweets from Adisa were floating too. Their eyes closed, their faces calm. They moved through the sky like shadows, heading towards the same place, deep in the forest. At the heart of the forest, under an ancient twisted tree, the children stood in a perfect circle. A fire burned in the center, its flames flickering a strange blue color. Adisa stood in front of them, but she was different now. Her eyes glowed softly, and her smiles no longer seemed friendly. "You belong here now," she said. The children nodded as if in a trance. They didn't speak. They didn't resist. Every night, the same thing happened. By day, the children lived normally, but by night, their souls left their bodies, traveling deep into the forest. They stood in the circle, listening to whispers they could not remember in the morning. Something was changing inside them. At first, the parents didn't notice. The children still woke up, ate, and went to school like always. But then, small things began to change. One night, Kofi's mother woke up to fetch water. As she passed his room, a strange feeling crept over her. Something wasn't right. She pushed the door open and nearly screamed. Kofi was lying on his back, but his hands and feet were raised into the air, stiff and unmoving. His body did not twitch. His breathing was unnaturally slow, and his eyes were open. But they saw nothing. It was as if his soul was somewhere else. Her heart pounded. She rushed to his side, shaking him. "Kofi, Kofi, wake up!" His limbs dropped suddenly, and his body jerked as if something had been thrown back into it. Kofi gasped awake, eyes wild in confusion. "Mama," he whispered. His mother grabbed him tightly, feeling the cold sweat on his skin. "You were floating," she whispered. Kofi frowned. "No, Mama, I was dreaming." She stared at him, her hands trembling. This was not an ordinary dream. Ama's parent, on the other hand, noticed something else. She was always hungry. She ate twice as much as before. Even after finishing her food, she would lick her fingers slowly, as if still tasting something unseen. Sometimes, they caught her staring at raw meat, her lips slightly parted, as if she could smell something sweet in it. One afternoon, her mother found her standing at the kitchen door, silently watching as she cut up a chicken. "Ama, what are you doing?" she asked. Ama blinked slowly. "It smells good," she murmured. Her mother felt a chill run down her spine. She began to suspect something was wrong. Tunde's father was also the first to notice his eyes. One evening, sat at the dining table. Tunde looked up and his father felt a shudder deep in his bones. Tunde's eyes became too large and dark. For a second, just a second, his eyes didn't look like his own. They looked ancient, inhuman, and then they were normal again. His father blinked, his spoon frozen mid-air. Is this an imagination or a dream? But later that night, when he passed by Tunde's room, he saw his son sitting upright in bed, staring at the wall. His lips moved suddenly. His eyeballs were as dark as the night, and the whispers in the room were not his own. Many of the children began to have strange dreams. Dreams of running through dark forests, of fire burning under the ancient tree, of voices calling them by their names. Some woke up with scratches on their arms, as if something had clawed them in their sleep. Others screamed at night, thrashing against unseen forces. But the worst part, they didn't remember any of it by morning. Only their parents did. One by one, the parents began to notice. At first, they whispered amongst themselves, "Amma is always hungry. Have you seen how she eats?" Kofi talks in his sleep, but it is not his voice. Tunde's eyes changed at night. At this point, it became fishy that something was wrong with the children. The night was dark as usual. The moon hid behind thick clouds, and the winds whispered through the trees like 1,000 unseen voices calling in the night. Deep in the forest, under the ancient twisted tree, the children stood in a circle. Their eyes were half closed, their lips moving soundlessly as if repeating a forgotten chant. The blue fire flickered in the center, casting airy shadows that danced against the glaring bark of the tree. Adisa stood at the head of the circle. Her face was calm, but her eyes held a straight glow. She walked around the fire slowly, her feet making no sound against the earth. The children watched her in silence, waiting as they always did. Then she spoke. "Tonight, someone will prove their loyalty," she said softly. A chill swept through the air. The wind howled, the flames crackled. Adisa turned, her piercing gaze landing on Kofi. "It is your turn." Kofi's body stiffened, his heart pounded. "Step forward," Adisa commanded. His feet felt heavy, but he moved, stepping into the glow of the fire. Adisa circled him, her voice smooth and hypnotic. "We have all given something," she said. "Hair, rings, blood, animals. But you must give something greater." Kofi swallowed hard. "What do you mean?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Adisa smiled faintly, then leaned close to his ear. "You must bring your mother." Kofi's blood instantly turned to ice. The air around him grew heavy, pressing against his chest like unseen hands. His breath came in short gasps. "No," he whispered, shaking his head. The fire crackled louder. The other children turned their heads towards him, their faces blank, their expression unreadable. "You must," Adisa insisted. "I won't." Kofi stepped back, his hands trembling. Adisa's smile vanished. Her voice dropped, becoming almost inhuman. "She is the perfect offering. A mother's love is strong. Her soul will be powerful." Kofi's stomach twisted, his vision blurred, and for a moment, he felt the world tilting. The whispers in the wind grew louder. "Bring her! Bring her! Bring her!" Kofi clutched his head, squeezing his eyes shut. "No!" he screamed. The flames roared. A powerful gust of wind rushed through the forest, snuffing out the fire in an instant. Darkness swallowed them. For the first time, the other children stared, as if waking up from a deep sleep. Some looked confused, others frightened. And then, Kofi gasped awake, back in his bed. His body was soaked in sweat. His heart thundered in his chest. This time, when he sat up, he remembered everything. The next morning at school, Kofi could not keep quiet. He stormed up to Adisa. "I won't do it," he shouted. Adisa's eyes narrowed. The other children gathered around. Some looked scared, others looked angry. "You have to," one of them said. "No, it is wrong," Kofi snapped. They started arguing loudly. Then a teacher approached. "What is going on here?" Everyone froze. Kofi looked at Adisa. Adisa looked away. It was clear to the teacher that something was fishy, something dangerous, because she had overheard everything they had said earlier. This was not a matter she could handle on her own. She needed the attention of the headmistress. She took them all to the headmistress' office. The headmistress' office was silent. except for the nervous shuffling of feet. The room was packed. The teachers, the headmistress, and the parents sat in a circle, their faces tense with worry. In the center stood Adisa, Kofi, and the other children who had taken the sweets. Kofi's mother sat at the edge of her chair, her eyes swollen from crying. Other parents whispered amongst themselves. The headmistress folded her arms. Her voice was stern. "Now," she said, "someone should explain what is happening here." No one spoke. The children avoided eye contact. Adisa stared at the floor. "Kofi," the headmistress called out, "tell us what happened." He hesitated, then he exhaled loudly. He started with the sweets. One by one, the children spoke. "Adisa gave us sweets. That night, I had a dream, but it wasn't a dream. My body stayed in bed, but my soul left me. We floated to the forest, to a big tree. There was fire, and she was there." He pointed at Adisa. Adisa flinched but didn't look up. "She told us we belonged there." Murmurs filled the room. Some parents exchanged frightened glances. The headmistress nodded for him to continue. Kofi flicked his dry lips. "We went every night. We didn't even know how. One moment, we were fast asleep. The next, we were in the forest. And every time, she told us to bring something." The headmistress frowned. "Bring what?" she asked. Then a girl named Amma spoke. "She told me to bring my sister's hair." "And you did?" the headmistress asked. Amma nodded slowly. "I caught some while she was asleep and brought it." A woman, Amma's mother, clutched her chest. Another boy, Tunde, spoke up next. His voice trembled. "She told me to bring a black hen from my father's farm." "And you did?" He swallowed hard. "Yes, it was missing the next morning." A woman burst into tears. "She told me to steal my father's wedding ring." Another child whispered. "She told me to bring a drop of my mother's blood." Another confessed. "She told me to take my baby brother's blanket." The parents were horrified. Some shouted, others sobbed, but Kofi wasn't done. He clenched his fist and stared straight to Adisa. And then, "She told me to bring my mother." Gasp filled the room. Adisa's head snapped up. "Liar!" she hissed. But Kofi didn't back down. "You wanted me to sacrifice her." Parents stood up in shock. One woman almost collapsed and another clutched her chest. The teachers exchanged worried looks. The headmistress' voice was sharp. "Is this true, Adisa?" Adisa's lips quivered. She shook her head violently. "They are lying," she whispered. A teacher stepped forward. "If they are lying, Adisa, tell us, why do their parents say that they saw them floating at night?" Adisa's breath hitched. Her small hands clenched her dress. I. Her voice cracked. Her shoulders trembled. Then, like a dam breaking, tears poured from her eyes. "It was my grandmother," she sobbed. "She taught me before she died. She told me to bring others." The room fell silent. The parents stared in shock. The teachers exchanged looks. The headmistress sighed deeply and rubbed her temples. "And did you ever think about what you were doing, child?" she asked softly. Adisa's small body shook as she cried. "I didn't have a choice," she whispered. The other children shifted uncomfortably. They were waking up, realizing the weight of what they had done. They had been tricked, led into something dark, something evil, without even knowing. The headmistress turned to the parents. "This is not a matter of punishment," she said. "These children did not even know what they were doing. They must be saved." The parent nodded. A Catholic priest was called. There was no fire, no weapon, no anger, just prayers. As the priest laid hands on each child, their bodies trembled. Some cried out, others fell silent as if something had been lifted from them. And then the whispers of the night were gone. The children went home that evening. The village was peaceful again, but no one ever forgot what happened. And the children never again took sweets from strangers